So today we're making a character duel tier list after they removed Yuma and Jack in the latest update and added in Crow and Kite. And we are looking at the fully maxed out graded version of each deck, which means we're not looking at the grade 0 version of the deck. Those will look different, and the tier list will also look different. And so we're assuming that you have maxed out grades, which means you can replace up to 5 cards in each deck to make those decks stronger, or patch the deck's weaknesses, which really helps certain decks and makes them a lot better than what they would otherwise be on grade 0. So before we begin, I just want to say that the power levels of all of these decks are really close, and even closer than when character duels just began, because that's also exactly the same thing I said when I made my first character duel tier list video. But in that video, it's pretty obvious that Yuma and Jack are a lot better than the other decks just because of how the deck works with the skill, and because the skill just gives you consistency for free, you can just load up on non-engine in your deck and basically have no weaknesses, because you can just solve any weaknesses by just playing a lot of non-engine, which those decks have the ability to do that. And so without those two decks, all of the other decks are a lot more closer in power level, except for one outlier, which is a lot worse than the other decks, and you can probably guess which one it is if you've remotely played in character duels, but we'll talk about that later. And so let's begin with Yugi. Yugi, everyone knows that Yugi is really good. I don't think it is the best deck in the format, even when you add in grades. It is definitely really good. Its turn 1 board is essentially broken if you are able to set up. And having the circle, banish, and the navigation negate basically just wins you the game most of the time. It's really difficult for most decks to beat that. And also, if you go second, as long as you draw navigation in your hand, you are also in a really good position, just because you get to immediately put out 2 level 7 monsters on the field. If you have a circle on the field as well, you also immediately get a banish. And having the navigation on your hand in your hand to trigger your skill pretty much solves most of the issues of the deck going second. But in cases where you don't draw navigation, the deck will struggle a bit when you go second, because you have to set navigation and wait another turn, which gives your opponent more opportunities to get rid of your navigation or get rid of your circle. And when you go second, after you summon your 2 Dark Magicians, you can make a rank 7, and then the rank 7 will let you break your opponent's boards even more. So even getting rid of the circle is not enough when you play against Dark Magicians when they go second. But a lot of the deck's power ties to the circle being on the field, so a lot of decks already have built-in MSTs or Cosmic Cyclones, and people are playing even more copies of those 2 cards just to beat Dark Magician, because everybody hates the deck, which is understandable, because that's pretty much the only way you can reliably stop Dark Magician, which is to just get rid of their circle before they can banish your things. And so, as strong as Dark Magician is, it will never be too broken as long as people are playing these sorts of back removal in their decks, which is especially true when people are playing graded version of the deck, because they have more space to add in even more back removal if their deck is lacking in those sorts of cards. Okay, next let's have a look at Blue Eyes. So the defining factor of Blue Eyes is that their monsters are really big, and that means they can just beat over any other monster by battle, while the other player has to spend effects to try to get rid of the Blue Eyes, which is going to be a lot when you are able to spam a lot of Blue Eyes onto your field. And even for monsters that you can't beat over by battle, maybe they have a monster with protection, or they just have more attack than 3000, you can still make a Twin Burst Dragon pretty easily, and then get rid of any sort of monsters your opponent has that you can't beat over with your vanilla Blue Eyes. And when you go first, the deck is able to make Spirit Dragon, which tags out into Azure Eyes, which protects all of your monsters by card effect destruction and targeting effects, which makes it even more difficult to get rid of, and also just summons back Blue Eyes from your graveyard to fill the board with high attack monsters. And most importantly, what I think the deck does best is it is basically, I think, the best deck in the format to play around MST and Cosmic Cyclone, because as I said, for the Yugi deck, everybody is playing MST and Cosmic Cyclone just to beat Dark Magician, but Blue Eyes deck can get around that by just playing Hallow the Life Barrier as their pretty much their only trap card in the deck, which means even if you get hit by an MST or Cosmic Cyclone, all you will do is force out the Hallow the Life Barrier, and that essentially doesn't do anything. They can just chain the Hallow the Life Barrier. And so Kaiba's deck pretty much has answers to every other deck and has like the highest potential in terms of the power level, but the main thing that is holding it down is the consistency, because you're playing a whole bunch of bricks and you have to draw the right combination of them to be able to do the fullest potential that the deck can do. So as strong as the cards are, it's only going to be good and not the best tier. Okay, so now let's look at Joey's deck. So previously, Joey was unanimously the worst deck that people have decided in character duels, and it has been a little bit better now that they buffed the deck by giving it more Fang with Chains and Gearfried, the level 4 Gearfried. So the deck does have more options to interrupt your opponent and play around stuff better, trigger your skill more often. But the whole game plan of the deck is still having one big monster with a target negation. And even though, searchable Fang with Chain is a pretty good interruption, to be fair, you are still relying on Red Eye Slash Dragon sticking on the field. And that is really strong if that succeeds. If you successfully get it in an equip spell on the field, you are in a really good position and it's really difficult for you to lose. But you are very vulnerable when you still don't have an equip spell on the field. So as long as your opponent can prevent you from having any sort of equip spell on the field, you are going to be in a much more rough position. And even then, the deck still has other game plans. Like Slash Dragon isn't the only thing they can do. They can still use Fang with Chain and just revive the normal Red Eyes with Red Eye Spirit or stuff like that. So it's not like Slash Dragon is the only way you can win, but Slash Dragon is going to be definitely your main game plan, and it being on the field with an equip spell is what is going to decide most of your games. Next up is Jaden. So Jaden is a deck that I didn't think was very good back in my first tier list video, but my opinion has changed. Not only that, but also the deck did get more support in the form of Crosskeeper, and that card is really, really good. That card basically allows you to draw 2 cards every time you successfully combo, which is going to be very often because the quote-unquote combo of Neos is just activating Neos Fusion, and then you get to send Crosskeeper to your graveyard, and then you draw 2 cards. And that means the deck is both really consistent and also has a lot of space to play back row, to play any sort of non-engine that you like. And you also have a really high chance of having a good amount of non-engine in your hand because Neos Fusion sends 2 cards from your deck to the graveyard, you already deck fin yourselves for 2, and then you draw an additional 2 cards. That is a really big chance of you drawing what you want. And so Neos has become this sort of non-engine deck that has answers to pretty much everything. And it's kind of like Honor Mats back in the day, where they can use the draw spell to draw, but instead of them having to hard open the draw spell, you can just activate Neos Fusion, which you have 9 copies basically, because you have 6 Neos and the skill converts the Neos into Neos Fusions. And then you can just draw anything that you want. You can put back the garnets back into your deck, and then you can just have a Brave Neos, set a couple of cards, and then just pass turn. And your monsters are also pretty good. Like Brave Neos goes up to 3200 attack if you are able to trigger your skill, and it also has a copy of Neos Fusion that you're gonna have in your graveyard to protect it from any sort of destruction effect or being destroyed by battle. And that's only turn one, right? Because if you survive a turn, on your next turn you can begin to make two fusion monsters in a single turn by activating Miracle Contact first, and then activating Neos Fusion after you summon the first fusion monster. So once you are able to kind of get into the game without being interrupted for too much, you can kind of snowball, especially when you can start destroying monsters by battle with Brave Neos, and you can search more copies of Neos Fusion, and then it will just keep going until you eventually win. And the another thing about the Neos Fusion game plan is that it just doesn't care about MST or Book of Moon. Like MST will do something because you're playing so many non-engine, and an opponent's MST will trade for one of your set non-engine like Book of Moon. But Book of Moon and MST don't really do anything to like stop your game plan. Even if they Book of Moon your Brave Neos, you still get to draw two. And even if they MST your back row, you still get to summon your Brave Neos. So it's not like something like Yuma where you or something like a Jack or any sort of Synchro or Xyz deck where you can stop their combo by flipping one of their monsters face down, because you can just activate a spell and then that summons a monster, and that's the end of your combo, and you can't really interrupt that really well with a card like Book of Moon. So that's another thing that the Neos deck does really well, is that it's really difficult to interrupt. But the deck does have some weaknesses, which is that Neos Fusion locks you. So on your first turn, you can only pretty much do one single thing, which is to activate Neos Fusion and then draw two cards and then set cards and attack with your Brave Neos. So that's only going to be like a single monster on the field, which means if your opponent has a way to get rid of it without destroying it, you are going to be in a really bad position because you won't have any sort of other big monsters to protect you. And also, the deck itself in engine isn't really that strong. The deck really relies on non-engine to be able to fix its weaknesses, which it can do very reliably because of the draw two, but you will still have some sort of a luck factor to what you draw. So with that said, it's still really good. I think it's even better than Dark Magician just because of the flexibility, and it doesn't have this like really big weakness of having their back row popped like Dark Magician has. And overall, it's like the most well-rounded deck, I think, in the format right now. It can play a lot of non-engine, you can draw into those non-engine, it's consistent. I think if you want a solid, consistent deck that just does its thing very well and is really difficult for your opponent to stop, this is definitely the deck that you should be considering. So next up is Zane's Cyber Dragon deck, and the one thing you need to know about Cyber Dragons is that even though the Cyber Dragon monsters themselves aren't very strong, they don't have a lot of attack, the main game plan of Cyber Dragon is, and has always been, Cybernetic Overflow, which is the strongest single trap card in the whole format because it allows you to destroy multiple cards without targeting. It's searchable. You basically have 9 copies because you have free Cyber Dragon core, free emergency to search the core, and then free copies of the trap itself. So you do have a really consistent access to the trap, and you can oftentimes even get multiple copies, which makes it even more difficult for your opponent to play against. Even if they open something like an MST or a Cosmic, they can't reliably get rid of your back row. And so the Cyber Dragon deck actually has a lot of back row synergy because of the things that they can search. So the scariest part of Cyber Dragon isn't the fusion monsters, it's the normal summoning Cyber Dragon core and then setting free cards, and that's the strongest thing that the deck can do. And so Cyber Dragon is basically this back row deck, and if you try to play this deck quickly, you oftentimes be countered pretty easily because the fusion monsters aren't strong. But if you play to the deck's strengths, the deck is really, really strong. And the deck also technically has this high offensive potential if you play Fusion Gate, because you can fusion summon multiple times, get a really high attack over dragon, or make multiple rampage dragons to beat your opponent. But those have other issues because if you play Fusion Gate, that card doesn't really do too much going first, and then that just that is a thing that doesn't really help you to set up your back row going first. If your opponent has any sort of answer to overflow, your Fusion Gate won't do anything, and Fusion Gate is also vulnerable to the things that beat Dark Magician, so those are another issue. But if you play the deck as a back row heavy strategy, I think the deck is really, really good. And the two main weaknesses of Cyber Dragons, the first one is consistency. People love to complain about Cyber Dragons not being consistent. I don't think it's that bad. You do have free copies of Core and free Cyber Emergencies, and that's quite a lot of starters in a 20 card deck, to be honest. But there is still moments where you don't open Cyber Dragon Core and your end board becomes a lot weaker than compared to if you open with a Cyber Dragon Core. And the other thing is that there are certain matchups where it's basically unwinnable. For example, the Neos matchup is really, really tough. Like, when I play Cyber Dragons and I see Jaden as my opponent, I just scoop immediately. I don't even want to spend any time to try to play out a game, because winning a game against Neos is really, really tough and pretty much impossible. Same with a deck like Sharks, because those monsters have a lot of floating effects, they have protection effects, and it's really hard to get rid of their monsters with a card like Overflow. And so I think Zane is still pretty good. I think it's a lot better than what people give it merit for, but it's definitely not as good as the top decks in the format right now. Alright, next deck is Yusei. Yusei is basically the one card combo deck, because if you have Junk Synchro in your hand, you just get to make a free Synchro monster basically. And Yusei is the only deck in the format where you can have a one card combo that gives you one interruption. And previously, I think like Automats could theoretically do that with Force Focus, but that isn't a thing anymore. And so, out of all the decks in Character Duels, that's the Yusei is the only deck that has a one card combo that gives you one interruption. And you can play into that strength by basically playing a lot of one card combos and then a lot of non-engine. And so the deck is consistent enough to play a lot of non-engine to still be able to do the linear combo pretty consistently and have a bunch of other set cards alongside the trap card that the skill gives you. And Charge Warrior, which is one of the hand traps that the deck has, is a monster that can send itself to the graveyard to double a monster's attack. That card is really good and can just win you games on its own. Even though it's not searchable, if you just have that card in your hand, which is not that unlikely in a 20 card deck, having 3 copies of Charge Warrior is kinda not that uncommon compared to some other cards that are limited to 1 that some other decks have to play. But Charge Warrior is a really good card, and even if you aren't using it for the attack boosting effect, it's still good as a discard for Quick Draw Synchron, and then you can banish it from the graveyard next turn for follow-up. But other than that, Yusei is just not a very good deck, unfortunately. The main thing being that the really consistent one card combo is just not very good. It's very fragile. It dies to very common interruptions that people have, like Book of Moon, just completely shuts the deck down. So even though the deck is consistent and has a lot of non-engine space, it can be interrupted pretty easily. And that's just how it is for decks like these. So I think it's still a bit better than Joey's deck, just because you have a lot of space for non-engine. Because in the Red Eyes deck, you run into this issue where you have a lot of equip spells, which means you can't really have a lot of other set quick play spells like Book of Moon or MST. You have to use your back row space for equip spells, but at least for Yusei, you have those spaces for anything that you decide to play. Okay, now let's talk about Crow. So, Crow, I cannot think of anything that a deck can do well. Like, this deck is literally bad at every single thing. And let's start with the nonsensical game plan that Konami decided to give this deck. So, let's start with going first. Your best game plan for Crow going first is to make Armor Master, which is a level 7 synchro, which cannot be destroyed by battle, and you take no battle damage. And literally every single deck has an out to Armor Master, except for Shark, for whatever reason. So, for example, Dark Magician can banish it with Circle, Blue Eyes has Twin Burst, Nears has Grand Mole, Cyber Dragon can just pop it with Overflow, Yusei has Junk Archer, Red Eyes has Fang with Chain, Kite has Photon Stream of Destruction. Yeah, you get the point. So, literally every single, I guess maybe in the mirror match it might be okay, but they can still change it to attack position and then just deal damage. So you will only have you can only have one single Armor Master in defense. Otherwise, they can just attack your other monsters, and then it's still gonna be really annoying. But literally every other deck has outs to exactly Armor Master, and other than Armor Master, this deck has nothing it can do going first. There's all of the cards in this deck doesn't do a single thing going first. I guess there is technically the level 3 main deck monster that cannot be destroyed with battle once per turn, but well, what are you talking about? That's like, is this some kind of joke? You can technically play one Moonlight Dragon. I wanna mention this really quickly. So Black Rose Moonlight Dragon is a level 7 generic synchro that you can play by spending a grade on the extra deck, but that card is still not very good. All it does is when your opponent special summons a level 5 or higher monster on their field, you can bounce a monster back to the hand, but most decks just don't care about this effect at all. Even decks that do play level 5 or higher monsters, they don't care about a single bounce, and they can also really play around it pretty easily by just setting it face down by Book of Moon. So okay, I guess the deck isn't good going first. What about the deck going second? It's even worse. The deck going second dies to any interruption. Like literally every interruption under the sun completely stops this deck. So for example, when you activate Black Whirlwind and you attempt to search, your opponent can activate MST or Cosmic Cyclone in response to your search, and then it stops you from resolving the search. Okay, how about when I normal summon a monster and then special summon Gale the Whirlwind from my hand? Well, if your opponent has a single Book of Moon, all of your cards are dead, because every single Blackwing monster requires you to have another Blackwing on the field to special summon. So guess what? If you normal summon a Blackwing and your opponent flips up Book of Moon, flips it face down, you no longer have a Blackwing, and then all of your monsters in the hand don't do anything, and then you just end your turn. That's like the worst thing ever. And even if your opponent miraculously does not have any interruption, maybe let's say like they bricked or something, I don't know, or maybe they're also playing Blackwing, your going second game plan is still not very good, even if your opponent just does not interact with you at all. You have to open Whirlwind to be able to search the correct levels, because otherwise it's pretty difficult for you to have exactly the right monsters in your hand to synchro summon the things that you need. And there's a card in the deck that gets you Whirlwind, which is Simoon the Poisonous Wind. It is a level 6 monster. And that card is also a way that you can play around one single Book of Moon because it gives you an additional normal summon. But guess what? It locks you into dark monsters, and the only extra deck card in your extra deck that actually has a good effect is Vermilion Dragon Mech because it allows you to destroy a card in the field. Guess what? It's the only non-dark extra deck monster you have as well. So if you use Simoon to start off your combo, you just straight up cannot activate the effect of Vermilion Dragon Mech, which means all you are left with are the bad synchro monsters that don't do anything, like Obsidian Black Joe, Hawk Joe, whatever it's called. That card is good if you have other good synchros to pair alongside it, but it's the only good one. There's a level 6 monster that just does piercing, and that's all it does. It also gains like 500 attack or something. It's not good. There's a combo extender that's level 6 that gives you an extra normal summon. That's fine, but again, there's no other good synchros to play alongside it. And then there's also like a level 5 monster that you never summon. So, all of this just makes the deck not do anything, even if you are able to play the game going second. And so if you're playing Blackwing, the main way you try to OTK is pretty much having to rely on Gale the Whirlwind's attack reduction effect and the effect of No Fung to deal a bit of burn damage and lower your opponent's attack even more, and then we can switch a monster to attack position with the level 1 shooter. But it's not good. It's not good is what I'm trying to say. Your synchro monsters are absolutely atrocious, and it doesn't do anything. So because of this, you also need a good amount of monsters in your hand because all of your synchro monsters are so bad, and you also have to have something like a whirlwind on your field to be able to guarantee that you can even start to play the game. But if you play more monsters to attempt to, spam out synchro monsters, the problem that comes is that, well, now you just lose to a Book of Moon because your whole hand is monsters, your opponent books your normal summon, now you can't even play the game. So, all of this also comes into the fact where your deck just has no space for non-engine. Like, because you have to play so many monsters for you to be able to do remotely anything, you just cannot play non-engine. You have like space for, I guess, free MST. That's pretty much it. And not only that, you also need space for a lot of bricks in the deck. There's a lot of one-offs that you just have to play, otherwise you can't make certain synchros, like the level 1 tuner, the level 2 tuner, the level 3 non-tuner. You just have to play these random things in your deck that you can't remove because you just need them for the combo. And so there's even less room for non-engine. And not only that, you also need 3 grades just to put 2 Simoons and 1 Whirlwind into your deck, because for whatever reason, the grade 0 version of this deck only contains 1 Simoon and 1 Black Whirlwind. And so to make this deck even remotely consistent, you need 2 more Simoons and 1 Whirlwind, 1 more Whirlwind, and that's already 3 out of 5 grades, and you only have 2 more grades left. Maybe you use it for, I don't know, 2 more MSTs. The deck is still not going to be good. The deck still doesn't do anything going first. It still dies to 1 Book of Moon going second. Maybe you have more ways to play around it because you have 3 Simoons and 3 MSTs, but they can just have a second interruption, or they can just get rid of your Black Whirlwind. And after all of this, the deck also has no follow-up. The deck just does one thing, which is to try to OTK. It does it really poorly. If it fails, it has no follow-up. You can't do anything to make this deck good. So, if Konami needs to make Blackwings playable, they're gonna have to completely redo the Grade 0 deck. They have to, first of all, at least give us 3 copies of Simoon and 2 copies of Whirlwind if they're not gonna, unlimited Whirlwind, because Whirlwind is limited to 2 for whatever reason. That's the first step. The second step is to give us actually good synchro monsters, like Raikiri, the Rain Shower, which is the level 7 synchro that destroys stuff on the field. And maybe also Chidori, the Rain Sprinkling, which is the level 7 synchro that gets really, really big. Like, it boosts its own attack according to the amount of Blackwings you have in the graveyard. That would be a good addition for the deck to actually have teeth. And maybe at this point, I think we can also give the deck like a one single copy of Blackbird Close, like maybe limit it to one, because a counter trap in a deck like this is fine because the deck just doesn't do a single thing going first. So having one single counter trap is I think it's fine at this point. So yeah, absolutely unplayable deck. Let's continue on with the next deck. Okay, so next up we have Shark. So Shark is kind of like Blue Eyes in the sense that your main game plan is just to spam big monsters. Your monsters don't have as high as a raw attack of Blue Eyes. You only go up to 26 or 28, but you do have the effect of Spider Shark to lower your opponent's attack by 1,000. So effectively, you go over 3k pretty much most of the time. So the deck does one thing better than Blue Eyes, which is that it is a lot more consistent. It does have a lot of one-card combos. The one-card Buzzsaw Shark combo basically gives you a free rank 4, and if you use it to make Bahamut Shark, you can summon another Xyz from the extra deck, and then you can rank up the Bahamut Shark into Full Armor Photon Ray Lancer. And that is a really strong OTK tool that you can add by using you can spend a grade to add that card to your extra deck. And then you can also rank up the other thing that you summon from Bahamut Shark into a Shark Drake. And that is also a really good card for OTKing. So just from a single Buzzsaw Shark plus a spell or trap in your hand, you can get two really good monsters for dealing a lot of damage. And that's pretty good, right? And that also means that you have a lot of space for non-engine, just like all of the other consistent decks. So pretty much the thing about consistent decks is that when a deck is consistent, you have a lot of space for non-engine, and that is a really good thing. And also the main reason why Yuma and Jack were so broken. And Shark also has that amount of space for non-engine as well. But here comes the biggest weakness, which is that the deck itself in engine has 0 removal effects or interruptions. All of the removal interruptions are all from non-engine. And you can play non-engine, that's what the grades are for, right? But you will have to basically draw the out, is what I'm trying to say. And if you don't draw the out, there are basically matchups that you are unable to just play. So for example, if you play against Blue Eyes, they fusion summon a Twin Burst, they put it in defense position, you just cannot play. Full Armor Ray Lancer, that can negate attack position monsters' effects. So if they put it in attack position, you still have a chance, but if they put that card in defense and then they slowly chip away on your board by using their own effects, you just cannot win. Even a Book of Moon is not going to save you, because even if you flip the fusion monster face down, you still can't beat it by battle. So they're going to be really rough matchups just because of how your deck works. And so for that reason, it can't go too high. I think it's either like the end of good decks or the top of alright decks. I think I will put it in alright. I'll put it in alright. Maybe bottom of good. I'll put it here. Like, the deck is still really consistent, and that is, I think, the more important part. And so finally, we are going to talk about Kite, which is Photon. This is really good. Okay, I think Photon is the best deck in the format. And even in grade 0, it's really good, but today we're talking about the maxed out version, and the deck maxed out is even crazier. So, a few things about Kite. First thing is that it's consistent, and that of course means you have space for non-engine. You don't have as much space as the other decks because you need a good amount of monsters for you to be able to actually make the rank 4 monsters, because your skill, it does give you some consistency, but it doesn't give you consistency in the form of just giving you free monsters in your hand. So you'd still have to draw a good amount of monsters, which means you can't play too many back row. And also because the skill gives you a continuous trap, so it just spends one of your free back row spaces. And a lot of the times you're also going to have a copy of Photon Orbital equipped to your Xyz monster, which means you only pretty much have one slot left, which is going to most often times be the Photon Stream of Destruction. So the deck can theoretically play a lot of non-engine, but usually you won't choose to do that just because of how the deck works. But the main thing that makes this deck so good is that Photon Stream of Destruction is so very, very good. That card is a quick play spell, allows you to banish a card on the field, any card, as long as you control a Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon. So the main thing about that card is that it is balanced around the fact that you have to summon out Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon, so it isn't live immediately, and also you can get interrupted by removing the Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon from the field. But the deck does have a few ways of getting the Photon Dragon out, and once it does, people think that the deck isn't that good just because you can get rid of the Photon Dragon and it completely shuts the strategy down. But getting rid of the Photon Dragon is not as easy as you think, because the end board, the standard end board of Photon, isn't just a Photon Dragon with nothing else on the field. It is a copy of Star Liege Photon Blast Dragon with a Photon Orbital equipped to it. And that means that all of your monsters, every single monster that you have, because they all have 2000 or more attack, they all are unaffected by targeting effects, they can't be destroyed by card effects, and then the Blast Dragon is also unable to be destroyed by battle. So it is incredibly difficult to out any monster on your field, not just the Photon Dragon. You can't destroy it by effects, you can't target it. If you try to attack over it, with a monster with more than 3000 attack, you can just activate the effect of Photon Dragon to banish itself, and then it comes back at the end of the battle phase. Or even if they have a way to get rid of your setup, you still have the quick play spell of Photon Stream of Destruction as a banish. So all of this setup plus the banish on your field is what makes the deck so incredibly strong. This setup that you can also do in grade 0, mind you, it's just easier to do in grade 5 just because you have more space for Photon Vanisher and Photon Stream of Destruction, but this setup is completely possible in grade 0 if you draw well enough, and it is pretty much impossible for any deck to beat. And all of that setup is doable from basically a 1.5 card combo. You just need a Photon Vanisher plus any level 4 or level 4 Photon. So you normal summon the Photon, special summon Vanisher, add Photon Dragon to your hand, make Blast Dragon, summon the Photon Dragon from your hand, use your trap card that you set from your skill, send the Photon Dragon to your graveyard, add Orbital, summon Orbital to your field, add the quick play to your hand, set the quick play, equip the Orbital to the Xyz monster, your opponent's turn, you revive back the Photon Dragon with your Xyz monster. So that's the whole setup. You did that all using only 2 monsters in your hand, and you still have 2 other cards. So this deck is really, really good. And the only weakness, I guess there is a few weaknesses of this deck. I still don't think this deck is as good as Jack and Yuma, as much as the setup sounds so incredibly broken. I still think that this deck is not as good. So if Jack and Yuma were in this tier list, they're going to be in a new tier above everything else. So just keep that in mind. But as strong as the Kite setup is, the deck is beatable. Like, the deck still relies on the trap card being on the field, so that is something that you can get rid of. People are already playing back row removal to counter Dark Magician. They can use the same thing to counter Photon. Orbital makes their monsters incredibly difficult to get rid of because it increases the attack value of Star Liege to make it protect itself, and also gives it immunity to being destroyed by battle. But their back row is their biggest weakness. You can get rid of their trap card and then get rid of their Orbital, and then now you can attack over the Star Liege, and then all that's left is the Photon Dragon, which doesn't really do too much on its own. And unlike the other 2 decks on the top, Dark Magician doesn't really care about Book of Moon, Neos doesn't really care about Book of Moon, but the Kite deck does get affected by Book of Moon and MST both. So the most common non-engine that people are playing, they all affect Galaxy Photon, unlike Neos or Dark Magician, which would like randomly just not care about one of the 2 more common quick play spells that people are playing. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the tier list. And I'm willing to listen to any other opinions that are going to tell me that I'm wrong, because I'm just one guy on YouTube that's yapping about character duels. And it is very possible that some of the decks are a lot weaker or a lot stronger than what I think. A lot of people are telling me that I'm biased towards Cyber Dragons because I play that deck. I play that deck not because I think the deck is good. I play the deck because I like Cyber Dragons. I play the deck in the TCG. I play the deck in Master Duel. I like Cyber Dragons. I know the deck isn't like best. Otherwise, I would be playing Automats back when character duels first got released. But that's besides the point. I would like to know what you think about the deck in character duels. And also let me know if you would like to see a tier list for a tier 0 character duel deck list. But just for fun, before I end the video, let's just mess up the tier list for a bit so people who skip to the end would be a bit confused. So I don't know, let's put Kite here. Let's put Crow here, this here, Yusei here. Okay, Cyber Dragons, method defining. Dark Magician down here, Joey up here. Kaba here. Yeah, that looks about right. All right. So yeah, that's what I think about the tier list. Let me know if you have any things that you want me to make in the future, any decks you want me to talk about, or if you have a differing opinion, or you think that I'm biased towards a certain deck. I really want to hear what you would like to think. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.